Good evening, everyone. So now we're looking at MI, Management Information, and our topic for tonight will be accounting for overheads. So how do we account for overheads? When we say overheads are normally expenses. So overhead can be, we have two types of overhead. You can have a production overhead and non-production overhead. So these topics we'll be looking at so many content for this topic. We'll be looking at manufacturing overhead, introduction to absorption costing, overhead absorption, apportionment of service department cost, overhead absorption, under absorbed and over absorbed overhead. Then we'll be looking and then fixed and variable overhead. Now let's talk about manufacturing overhead. As I've said before, we said overhead can be divided into two: manufacturing overhead and non-manufacturing overhead. When we say manufacturing overhead, we are saying all overhead, all expenses that are not material, that are labor, which are used in the production of a goods and services. We call them manufacturing overhead. So let's look at direct and indirect costs. As I've said before, overhead is a cost or it's an expenses. And when we say direct cost or direct expenses or direct overhead, we are saying manufacturing cost or manufacturing overhead. They are almost the same. Now, what is cost? So, costs that are assigned to cost objects can be divided into two broad categories: direct and indirect costs. So when we want to produce a particular product, so we have direct and indirect costs. Both categories can be further divided into direct and indirect materials and direct and indirect labor costs. So all these direct costs and indirect costs can be divided into direct material or direct labor, then direct overhead, and then what? Indirect overhead. So let's look at a direct cost. What do we mean by direct cost? Direct cost is a cost that can be traced in full to the product, service, or department that is being costed. So when we say direct cost, we are saying these are costs that can be traced in full to a particular product, services, or department. So any cost that can be traceable, we say they are direct costs. While indirect costs or overhead, so in most cases, an indirect costs are overhead. In most cases, but not all the time, because when we say manufacturing overhead, we have non-manufacturing overhead, we have production overhead and non-production overhead. So but when we talk about indirect cost or overhead, it's a cost that is incurred in the cost of making a product, providing a service, or running a department, such which cannot be traced directly and in full to the product, services, or department. Such costs include the following, like factory rent and rates, supervising costs, machine depreciation, heating and what? Lighting. All these are indirect overheads. They are non-manufacturing overheads, which you cannot trace them to a particular cost center, maybe to a particular cost object. So we are saying such costs are indirect costs or non-manufacturing overhead or non-production overhead. Not distinguish between direct and indirect costs. Sometimes direct costs are treated as indirect because it is not cost effective to trace such directly to the cost object. The major difference between a direct and indirect cost is that a direct costs are costs that can be traceable to a particular cost object, while indirect costs While indirect costs are costs that cannot be traceable, that cannot be traced to a particular cost object. For example, the nails used to manufacture a particular desk can be identified specifically with the desk, but because the cost is likely to be insignificant, the expenses of tracing such item does not justify the possible benefits from calculating more accurate product cost. Now, for you to ascertain the total direct cost for a particular cost object, when a particular cost is insignificant and you want to trace that cost, and the cost that you will incur in tracing that cost to the cost object is higher than the cost you incurred on that cost object, then we are saying it's not cost effective, as it's not cost benefit for you to spend such a cost just to know just to trace particular cost. So we say, instead of doing so, we can assume that cost as an indirect cost. Period and product cost. When we say period and product cost, what is product cost? These are those costs that are identified with goods purchased or produced for resale. In a manufacturing organization, they are costs that are attached to the product and that are included in the inventory valuation for finished goods or for partly complete goods, that is work in progress, until they are sold. They are then recorded as expenses and matched against sales for calculating profit. Now, when we say product cost, as I said before, we have production cost, we have a production cost and non-production cost. Now, when we say production costs are costs that is being used to value the cost of closing inventory. Now, your direct materials, so all materials used in producing a particular item, they are used in valuing the closing inventory. Your labors, your direct labor, these are also used in valuing the closing inventory. Why manufacturing overhead, which are indirect, these costs, they are not used in valuing our closing inventory. So such costs must be treated as what? As a period cost. Then what is a period cost itself? Say period costs are those costs that are not specifically related to manufacturing or purchasing a product or producing a service that generates revenues. Therefore, they are not included in the inventory valuation, and as a result are treated as expenses in the period in which they are incurred. Hence, no attempt is made to attach period costs to products for inventory valuation purpose. So all these costs that cannot be traceable to the particular service, a particular product, these costs are called a period cost. They are not used in valuing our closing inventory. So let's talk about fixed production overhead. I will say before, we have fixed production overhead. Now, fixed production overhead are used to value our closing inventory, and they are also not used in valuing our closing inventory. It depends on the approach in which we use in preparing our operating statement. So in cost accounting, we have two major costing approach, which is marginal costing and what? Absorption costing. Now, the fixed production overhead under this marginal costing, they are not used as our production costs, so they are not part of our product cost. They will be classified as a period cost. That is to say, you are not going to use them to value your closing inventory. They might be traced as period costs and charged as expenses against the period in which they are incurred, without any attempt to add a share of the fixed overhead costs to the cost of unit of production. But when you use this other method, which is the absorption costing method, so they might be shared. They might be shared. They might be shared out between cost units or process. Fixed production overhead costs might be charged to cost units in addition to direct material, direct labor, and what variable overhead. So that the cost of goods sold as cost in units fairly reflects the actual cost of production. When fixed production overhead are charged to cost units, they are said to be absorbed by them. Now, under this particular absorption costing, when you want to charge our fixed production overhead, we use what we know as fixed production absorption rate. What we know as fixed production absorption rate. You understand this fixed production absorption rate in the course of our study tonight. Now let's look at manufacturing, administrative, and what selling costs. Now, the manufacturing costs should be used in valuing our closing inventory, while the administrative and the selling costs should not be used in valuing our closing inventory. Now, manufacturing costs are product costs. They are the cost of making. They are the cost of making. They are the cost of making cost units, and are included as part of the cost of inventory in accordance with financial reporting rules set out in IAS 2 inventories. Now, when we say IAS 2 inventories, we are saying this fixed production overhead, when you charge them to our production cost to value our closing inventory, we are saying that rules that absorption costing techniques follows the IS2 scope, the IS school requirement. So that is to say, IS2, when we to value our inventory, we use absorption costing. IS2 said that cost of inventory shall comprises all cost of purchase, cost of conversion, and other costs incurred in bringing the inventory to their present location and condition. So let's talk about selling cost. Selling overhead are expenses related to the process of selling inventory to customers rather than the actual production of the inventory. Selling overhead might be incurred before the production of the inventory in cases where sales people obtain orders in advance of production, but it is more commonly associated with costs incurred after the inventory is being completed. Selling overhead include distribution costs, where this relates to transferring goods to customers. So selling overhead is also include what our distribution costs. Selling costs are period costs and are expensed in the period to which they relate. Now, selling overhead, they are not part of our production costs, so they are period costs. They are example of what? They are example of a period cost. The same thing applies to administration costs. Some administration costs might be manufacturing costs. For example, the factory management might be said to have an administrative function. However, the term administration generally relates to the function necessary for the overall running of the business. Now, when we say administration cost, we are talking about all that cost that is being incurred by the organization in running the business, which is not traceable to the product or a cost object. We are saying such it can be also classified as what? Administration cost. Introduction to absorption costing. Now let's talk about absorption costing. Absorption costing. Manufacturing companies are concerned to understand what units have caused them to produce or will cause them to produce in the future. Absorption costing had a share of fixed production overhead to direct material, direct labor, and variable overhead to obtain a full cost or a fully absorbed cost for cost units. It is a system of costing in which a share of fixed overhead costs is added to the direct cost and variable production overhead to obtain a full cost. Now, absorption costing is talking about um the addition of our direct labor, direct material, and variable overhead Now, when you add it together, you now have to add the share of fixed production overhead. Then how we do the share? You must look for the fixed production absorption rate. That rate is what we use to multiply the units produced during the year to know what will be included in our production. Now, this might be a full production cost or full cost of sales. Now, let's check what is this fixed production overhead absorption rate. Now, the fixed production overhead absorption rate. This is simply dividing the total fixed production overhead. Now, in our question, we will be given the total fixed production overhead. When we divide that with the budgeted, that is budgeted fixed production overhead over the budgeted total activity level, we will have this fixed production absorption rate. By the total number of units or total hours to be worked, may not arrive at a fair allocation of fixed production overhead to different inventory lines. The company must undertake a series of steps in order to arrive at meaningful rate. One, identify the fixed production overhead, which is you must identify the total budgeted fixed production overhead. Share the fixed production overhead to departments or cost centers or term which will be explained shortly, which is if not a cost center, it must be a other production center in the factory, thus working out a fixed production overhead for each department. That means you can share them with also with the department. So you can share them with what? Different departments or different products. Estimate the fixed overhead absorption rates based on usage of resources in each department. Now let's talk about allocation, apportionment, and absorption. Allocation, apportionment, and absorption. There are two main stages in absorption costing for sharing overhead costs to the cost of production and cost units. So we have the allocation and absorption. the allocation and absorption. These are means of charging fixed production overhead to a cost center. So let's talk about the allocation. Overhead are allocated to a cost center if a cost center is responsible for the entire cost of an item of expenditure. The entire cost is charged directly to the cost center. Now let's explain this allocation. Allocation simply means that you don't share. You allocate means you take the cost, the whole cost, and include it to a particular cost center. For example, a company incur electricity, and out of the electricity bills that was being delivered to the company has, let me say, three different departments. Now, when we say allocation means that if a particular department has its own meter separate, now the cost of the electricity bill for that department will be allocated to the production center, or the head office can allocate a cost directly to a particular center. So when a cost in entirety, in the total is being allocated, is being directly included in a particular center or cost object, we said that method used is cost allocation. When we say absorption, many overhead costs are costs that cannot be allocated directly to one cost center because they are shared by two or more cost centers. These costs are apportioned between the cost center. So we are saying apportionment means sharing on a fair basis. Now when we say apportionment means when you incur a particular cost, but the cost is not incurred on a particular cost center. There will three or different cost center. We have to share it, not like the way in a multinational house, in a house whereby there is tenant, when they incur electricity bills, that bills will be shared. That's when we share that bills among each tenant, we are saying that is called apportionment. It's apportionment. But when a particular bill is tailored directly to a particular individual, that is what allocation. We allocate it to him because it's only one. Maybe for example, in the house, nobody was around, nobody used the light, it was only one that's around. So that's when they bring that bill at that point there, they need to allocate it to him alone. So absorption also called overhead recovery. When overhead have been allocated and apportioned to production centers, to production cost centers, they are charged to the cost of products manufactured in the cost center. The method of charging overhead to cost units is to establish a charging rate, which is the absorption rate, which is the same thing as our fixed production absorption rate, and to apply this rate to all items of production. You will understand this apportionment, this absorption, in our illustration that we are going to give. Overhead cost allocation. Many items of indirect costs cannot be charged directly to a cost unit, a unit of products or service, but they can be charged directly to a cost center. Let's say a cost center, for example, a department or cost group. Items of expenses that can be identified with a specific cost center should be charged in full as a cost to the cost center. The process of charging costs directly to a cost center is called cost allocation. So when you charge a particular cost directly to a cost center, we say that process is called cost allocation. It's called cost allocation. Fixed production overhead may be allocated to. So how can we allocate our fixed production overhead? It may be allocated to our production department or our service department. So to the production department or operation centers, these are cost centers that are directly engaged in manufacturing the products. They are called the production department or the production centers While the service department or the service centers, these are cost centers. These are cost centers that provide support to the production department but are not directly engaged in production, such as engineering. They provide support such as engineering, repairs, and maintenance. The production stores and the materials handling department the raw materials inventory, production planning and control, and so on. Production overhead are the overhead costs of both the production department and the service department. So let's look at overhead absorption. The absorption of shared costs between cost centers, cause some costs cannot be allocated in full to a cost center because they are shared by two or more cost centers. These are divided between the cost centers on a fair basis. The process of dividing the shared cost center is called what? Absorption. So when you share something, when you apportion something, when you share it using a specific basis, a fair basis, you say that is what? Apportionment. But when you share a cost when you share a cost using the total activity level, that means you share them among a cost object, we are saying it's called absorption. But absorption is always for fixed production overhead. Shared costs may be divided between administration cost centers and selling and distribution cost centers, as well as production centers and service centers. The apportionment of production overhead costs might be in two stages. Sharing or dividing general costs between production centers and service centers, and the sharing the cost of the service centers between the production centers. This is called secondary apportionment. That means after you've shared the particular cost to production and the service center, you now reshare apportion the service department's total cost total cost to the production department. This is a secondary approach. So this is what we will talk about in our next class. After this has been done, all the production overhead costs have been allocated or apportioned to the production centers. The total overhead costs of each production centers should be one, cost allocated directly to the production center. So that means the total production cost, because that is the way we want to know the value of the. You have to know if you want to for pricing now, you want to know the amount you want to price a particular product. You must use this basis apportionment. You must know the total production center cost plus the share cost apportioned to the production centers. So other costs that were being shared to the production centers and the share of the cost of each service department apportioned to the production department or the production centers. Now other costs included in other departments that will now be shared or apportioned to the production department. So what is the basis of apportionment? How do we go by this apportionment? Shared overhead costs should be apportioned on a fair basis between cost centers. For each item of shared expenses, a fair basis for apportionment must be selected. At the end of the apportionment process, all overhead costs should be allocated or apportioned to a cost center. The basis of apportionment should be fair and equitable. So now let's see the major reason, the major problem in apportionment is how to recognize the basis of apportionment. Now, you cannot identify the fair or equitable basis if you don't know what drives the cost. You must know the cost and what warrants the cost and what is the measurement of that cost, or what can we use in tracing that cost. Examples of basis of apportionment commonly used are the space occupied by cost center. So ways that you use, that is the square meter, the space, number of employees can also be used. Value of plants, so the value of plants can also be used. Number of materials requisitions, kilowatt hours of energy used. So when we talk about cost of energy use, house power energy use. So all these are basis of what? Apportionment. Now let's use these questions to explain all what we'll be saying from the onset. Illustration 1. So a manufacturing company has two production departments. Manufacturing and assembling, and service, and two service departments. Repairs and quality control. The following information is available about production overhead costs. So we have the two production departments, which is machining and assembling. These are the two departments. Why these other two are service departments? Now the indirect labor cost or indirect materials. So the total, which is 15,500. So the cost for each department is being known. So no need to share this, no need to apportion this, because it's been known. They've already allocated them. The indirect material, so we know the material that they both incurred, so it's known. But now the factory rent. Now the factory rent. So the factory rent now, which is the rent of the building as a whole, the rent of the factory as a whole. So how can this rent, this 40,400, be apportioned? And why is it the power cost, which is electricity? The power cost, which is what? Electricity. And that one is the depreciation. So how can we apportion depreciation to the production department and the service department? Another thing is the building insurance. How can we allocate or apportion the building insurance to the cost, to the production centers and the cost center? Another one is equipment insurance. Equipment insurance. Equipment insurance. So how do we going to allocate or apportion the equipment insurance, which is the 4,200, among the four production and service departments? So we are giving a note. So depreciation is charged for the use of items of plant and equipment such as machinery. So use of machinery. Indirect labor and indirect material costs have been allocated directly to these four cost centers. The other overhead costs are shared between the cost centers and so cannot be allocated directly. So others cannot be allocated directly because these factory rentals, power costs, depreciation, building insurance, and equipment insurance cannot be shared to the cost centers. So cannot be allocated rather to the cost centers. So they want to share it, they want to apportion it. So we are giving the basis of apportionment. So we have cost of plants or an equipment, which is 70,000, which is total cost, and machining has 40,000 naira, assembly has 15,000 naira, repair has 5,000 naira, and quality control has 10,000 naira. When you add the four together, you understand that it is 70,000 naira. Now the floor area, which is the square meter, is 1,800, which is the total factory. So the machine space is 500 square meters. The assembly is 900 square meters. The repairs is 100 square meters, and the quality control is 300 square meters. Now the kilowatt hour, which is 800 are in total for the factory or as a whole. The machinery has 600, the assembly has 100, repairs has 50, and then quality control also has 50 kilowatts, or in thousands. Now you are required. How should overhead be allocated and apportioned between the four cost centers? So you want to know the total cost or the total overhead cost between the cost centers. Now doing this is that very simple. To apportion it, you have to apportion it. And how to apportion it? These costs that are yet to be allocated will be apportioned, starting from the factory overhead. And you must identify the major basis of apportionment. The major basis of what? Apportionment of the factory renter. Now when you look at this factory renter, so let's look at our workings. The factory renter, the rent can be paid using can be apportioned using square meter. So the space occupied by the higher the space should be the higher the cost, because so that still in the bigger apartment will pay rent, higher than someone that's still in apartment lower than his or her own. So for factory renter, we can apportion it using what? Using floor area, which and the total is what? 1,800. So you will come and will say the base for apportionment is what? The floor area. And how we do that? It will say the 14,400 divided by 1,800 will give us 8 naira per square meter. So when we, after getting this, they will now multiply it with each center's square meter. So let's go to factory cost now. The square meter for machining is 500. When we multiply by 500, we get 4,000. When we multiply for assembly 900, you get this. When we multiply for repairs, we get this. And when we multiply for quality control, we get 2,400. So this will now be the cost for factory renter. That is what is being stated here. Now, power cost. How will you share power cost? Power should be shared using what? Kilowatts hours. So kilowatt hours. So you also divide the power cost divided by the total kilowatt hours. So you have 6 naira per kilowatt hour. So you multiply it with each center's kilowatt hours. So we have for machining, we have 600 times 6, we get 3,600. Assembly is 1,100 times 6, 600. Repair is 50 times 6, 300. Quality is what? 50 times 6, which is what? Also 300. So that's how I got these figures for the power cost. Now another cost that should be apportioned is depreciation. Depreciation should be shared based on what? Remember, in accounting is based on the cost of what? An asset. So the cost of an asset. So how can we share it? The total cost of the asset is 70,000 naira. So we say division which is which is 70,000 naira. Which is 70,000 naira. So you are going to divide it by the, which is division which is 40,000 divided by what? 70,000, which is the total of the total cost of equipment in each cost center. By the time we divide it, we have 0.2. Now 0.2 when multiplied by 100, we have 20%. So you multiply it with each cost, which is, that means you are using cost model, straight line method, with each cost of the equipment in each cost center. So we have 70,000. So we have 40,000 times 20%, which is 8,000. 15,000 times 20% for assembly, which is 3,000. 5,000 times 20%, which is 1,000. Then 10,000 times 20%, which is what? 2,000. This is cost of depreciation that will be apportioned to each cost center. Now, building insurance. Building insurance she also follows the square meter. The square meter. She also follow the what? The square meter. Follow the what? The square meter. So the total square meter is 1,800, and the cost of the building insurance is 1,800. So when you divide it by 1,800 naira times 1,800 square meter, we have 1 square meter. So 1 square meter times our square meter for machining, which is 500, 900, 100, and 300. So we have 500, 900, 100, and 300. That is the cost that we have here. Now, equipment insurance, equipment insurance, equipment insurance, equipment insurance. Equipment insurance, equipment insurance. So for equipment insurance, because we can also use the cost of the equipment for this equipment insurance. So the equipment insurance cost is 4,200, 4,200, and the total cost of equipment is what, 70,000. So it's 6%. So we apply similar method we use for depreciation on this equipment insurance. So multiply this 6% by the cost of equipment in the machining, which is 40,000 times 6% is 2,400. Likewise for assembly, repairs, and quality. So the figure that we have here is 4,000, 2,400, 900, 300, and what, 600. So with this, when you multiply them together, we have 60,000 for the total, the machining 25,000, assembly 20,000, the repairs 7,000, then the quality control is 8,000, which is the total cost for the cost centers. So with this, we come to the end of tonight's class. But I'm giving you an assignment. Though this assignment is what we will do in our next class. So if you can lay your hand on this assignment and then do it, I will appreciate us. Do it and send the solution to me. In our next class, I'm going to solve it. Good night, and see you next week.